Welcome to the InStory show. I'm Devorah Spilman, your host, and today I am thrilled to welcome Rebecca Tripp. Hi, Rebecca.
Hi, Devorah. Nice to see you.
So Rebecca is a metaphysical counselor, a transformational coach, speaker, and author. And she also has some other neat things she's done in her life. So like with everybody, Rebecca, tell us a little bit about your story, about what's led you to where you are now.
All right. Well, I've had some kind of unusual things happen to me, starting when I was a teenager. I was always a seeker, even when I was a little girl. I was one of those people that was always asking the big questions. And but one day, though, I found myself sitting on the coast of Massachusetts. I think it was 1966. I was in college, and I was sitting there with a fellow that I was going out with, and we were just looking out over the ocean toward the island of Martha's Vineyard. Beautiful fall evening, and I saw these blinking lights off in the distance that came closer and closer and closer. And as they were blinking, I could distinctly see that each one was a saucer with a dome on top. And as they blinked, this orangey reddish color, they came closer and closer. We got out of the car and they were literally over our head. And I got such a good look at them. They were doing right angle turns. They were your classic UFOs that people describe. And this was the 60s when there seemed to be a lot of sightings, but it was awe-inspiring. It was mind-blowing. It was exciting. We called Otis Air Force Base the next day, which is on Cape Cod, to see if they knew anything. And they actually said, no. They said other people saw them though, but there were no helicopters or anything like that around could have been them. So that was it. I said, I've got to find out where these things are coming from. So I had always kind of wanted to be a stewardess. Back in those days, we were stewardesses. And I got highly motivated to join the airlines. It was either that or the Air Force, and I felt like the airlines was a better fit for me. So I started applying, and I got hired in 1967. I went to stew school with United Airlines, and I graduated in May of 67. And as soon as I started flying, I would go up to the cockpit and ask the pilots, have you ever seen any UFOs? Because I was dying to hear what they knew. And they would just sit there and sort of freeze up. They wouldn't talk about it. And then finally, one of the very senior pilots took me aside and he said, there's a reason none of these pilots want to talk. They could lose their jobs. We don't report UFOs. So that was the first thing I found out. But, my curiosity pursued, and I did interview quite a few people and got never any real definitive answers about where they're coming from, or they could be reverse engineered for all I know. I don't really know, but I do know there are some strange things out there. Well, the beauty of that experience for me was that it opened up my mind. After that, I could believe anything. So anything was possible. And so I started my career in Chicago, and there were these two men that moved into my building. It was all stewardesses in downtown Chicago in this building, but there was a man who managed it, and then these two men moved in because they realized there'd always be someone to take out to dinner and have a good time with, all these stewardesses. And one of them became good friends of my roommate and myself. And one day he sat us down and he told us how to manifest, because these guys made a lot of money and they seemed to know how to do it. So this fellow explained to us, you just take an index card, write down what you want in the present tense, put it by your bed, and feel like you've already gotten it when you go to bed at night and when you wake up in the morning. And I tried it because I really wanted to go live in New York City in a beautiful apartment. I didn't like windy Chicago. I'm from the East Coast, so it just didn't resonate with me that well. Well, within a very short time, our transfers went through. I talked my roommate into going. We waltzed into New York, rented a beautiful apartment, and everything just fell into place. And I got it, that you really can manifest what you think about if you believe it's going to happen. And it set me on the path. I just started devouring books on, positive thinking. The first book I read was Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. I asked him what was the best book on the topic, and he suggested that one. But then I went on after that and studied many, many, many metaphysical teachers. I've been studying metaphysics now for over 50 years. It put me on the path and got my attention. And I just love metaphysics. I think it's a fascinating topic. And I used to help my flying partners if they were trying to get a transfer to go through or a boyfriend to like them. I would explain to them how they could just visualize the end result. And I got letters from some of them saying, "You're not going to believe what happened." I just found out it was really natural for me to believe that, yes, you can manifest what you want in your life if you think a certain way, like believing that you've already gotten it. So that was what I started doing. Yeah, and I got really good at it.
All right, so share a little bit about what are some of the next steps where that led you?
Well, I was then living in California in my mid-20s. I transferred out to San Francisco from New York, and I was living in Marin County. I was in my mid-20s, about 26 years old, and I had, even though I was a very metaphysical person, I still had a terrible fear. I didn't have a fear of flying or, some of the fears that other people, but I had a fear of cancer. Because when I was a little girl, if anybody ever got it, it was like nobody wanted to talk about it. And it just seemed like a death sentence. And I was fearful of my physical body, betraying me like that, getting cancer. So what do you know? One day I went to the doctor and I was always asking them, do I have it? Do I have it? Well, he explained to me that he wanted me to go to a specialist. He was just a regular old gynecologist, and he sent me to some guy that was more adept at seeing things. And then they sent me to the hospital for a biopsy. And then this doctor called me up and said, "You have early cancer." And I was 26, and he wanted me to go to the hospital the following week and have a hysterectomy. Well, I almost passed out when he said that because I had never had any serious health problems or anything as the traumatic sounding as that happened to me. So then I said to him, "Well, what if I don't do that? What will happen to me?" And he said, "Well, you'll be dead by the time you're 40. It will have metastasized and gone all over your body." So I really went numb when I heard that. It was just horrifying to me, the two alternatives, death or, cancer. So I had met a man who had had a spiritual healing of a brain tumor a couple of months before this incident. And I thought of him and I said to myself, well, being of an open mind and knowing that you can manifest, but I couldn't figure out how to connect the dots between how your mind can control the cells in your body. I could see how you could visualize attracting experiences into your life. That seemed a lot easier to me than changing the cells in my body, but I still had a glimmer of hope that it was possible. So I went to a spiritual healer in Marin County. She happened to be a Christian Science practitioner. And as I sat in her office, not knowing what to expect, all of a sudden, as she was speaking to me, I felt this complete transformation come over my consciousness. The first thing she said to me to allay my fear was, well, if it's early cancer, that means it's superficial, which means that's pretty easy to heal. And that allayed my fear, calmed me down a bit. But then when she told me that perfect health was my birthright, because I was the perfect child of God, wow, she really got through to me. And I was so ready to hear it because I was up against the wall. I had nowhere to go. I wasn't going to go to Marin General Hospital and have surgery the next week, and I didn't want to die. So when you're up against the wall, amazing things can happen because you have nowhere to go. And that's what happened. As I sat there, this fear just lifted off of me. My consciousness opened up. I felt like I was leaving my trapped mortal body and tapping into my higher self, my intuitive, spiritual, perfect self that knew how to solve any problem. And bingo, I was healed instantaneously.
Wow.
To the point where passengers would always say to me as they were having conversations with me, I had this little speck in my cornea, in my eye, and it was kind of noticeable if you looked close. I went home, and when I looked in the mirror, all of a sudden I noticed that was gone.
Wow.
Yeah, and it was as if every cell in my body had been changed. And I felt like I'd gone from kind of an acidic to a alkaline system. Everything shifted. And for a year, everywhere I went, everything looked much, much better, more beautiful. The flowers, the people, the birds. I found I had a lot more intuition. Like, I remember one day I was in the galley, and this flight attendant came in and said, I think I'm coming down with a cold. And I said, no, you're not. You're perfect. And then she came back a few minutes later and said, guess what? It's all gone. But things like that were happening. I was living in a different frequency. And it's always there. It's, so many people are talking about it in this day and age because we're going through the great shift. There really is a higher level of consciousness, but we get so mesmerized and bogged down by this level that we function in with our five senses that it's difficult to free ourselves from that state and get to the higher realm. Yes. But I think it's so interesting the way the world is in pause right now with, what's happening with shutting down travel between countries. And of course, we're having the coronavirus pandemic, but it's putting everything on pause. And it's almost as if it's part of the plan for the big shift that everyone's talked about, because whether we want to or not, we have to accept that there's a new paradigm being created. And that's what happened to me when I shifted my consciousness from fear-based thinking to accepting that, of course, I'm perfect. I was born perfect. We're all perfect. And the only thing that keeps us from expressing that perfection is our own blocks. And I could see clearly my fear of cancer. I was also dating someone who was kind of a pathological liar. And that had been depressing me, so, and it was interesting. After this healing, I went and had lunch with him, and we had known each other for a number of years. But when I had lunch with him, I could see clearly how he had been manipulating me and kind of playing games. And I could see through it, and he knew I could, and he wished me well. And he said, I always knew you were very intuitive, and I wish you, well, and I know you're going to have a great life. And that was it. We parted company. So it was kind of interesting the way everything shifted.
Wow.
Everything shifted.
Wow.
Yeah. So that was something that a couple of other things that started happening after that healing experience. I felt like there was a huge knot over my head, and it started to unravel. And things that I had thought were okay to do, morally or whatever, I started to be horrified by operating like that. And it got me to a different level of operating. And I just wanted to move back to the East Coast, which I did. And I found every time I would sit down to pray and meditate, I felt like there was a waterfall going through this, inside of my body. It was very interesting. There were a lot of very fascinating things that happened after that particular healing.
So, I'm curious, because we happen to be doing this interview right in this moment of this coronavirus, which is having a very big effect on changing our lives and creating that pause. I would love for you to offer maybe some healing thoughts or guidance or what's come to you, because, I've been thinking about how it really is an opportunity for us to bring this much more positive, higher consciousness forward. And I would love a couple of your thoughts on this.
Well, the biggest thing we always have to handle when we're trying to fend off something or have a healing is the fear that creeps in. And perfect love which runs the universe, casts out fear. You cannot think two thoughts at the same time. I'll give you an example. If I was flying many times I'd be flying down to South America. When you cross the equator, you get more turbulence than anywhere in the world because the hot and the cold air begin to meet, and you can get severe turbulence, which can feel like the whole airplane is falling apart and you begin to wonder if you're going to make it. But what I could do is I would sit down and I would calm myself down, and I would tell myself that there's nothing to fear, and that, you know, God is in charge, and one with God is a majority, one awakened being. I don't care if you call it God, the universe, spirit, Atman, whatever. One person who has a higher elevated consciousness can transform an environment. So I would get very centered and calm myself down. And then, you know, it would all dissipate. But it's the same thing with this virus. Mass hysteria is not a good thing, you know, and it's very easy for people to get into hysteria because, there's something called, well, it's a form of hypnosis. You know, everybody starts to spread it around like a contagion. But yeah, but if you calm yourself down and you realize there's nothing to fear, because just like I proved I could fend off cancer cells, and I've been healed of many things since then that were considered dire, like an acute appendicitis. You can fend off anything. There's nothing to fear if you can put yourself in that higher realm where you're safe, you're protected, you're full of light, God's in charge. There's nothing to really worry about, and you will be protected. I've seen that so many times. I mean, in the airline industry, there's an opportunity so many times to just see things happen that were almost miraculous. You know, they happen every day. So if you can put yourself in that state where you're grounded, you're centered, you realize that you don't have to be fearful, and that this presence that I experienced, it's everywhere. Mm-hmm. It's just that we're not tapping into it with our five senses. We need to be in a situation many times where we're forced to look within and find that answer that we need. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So it's my wish to just offer everybody listening a moment of encouragement that we, you know, I've just been noticing, just to put ourselves in that positive place, to feel that positive energy, that what you said about what's possible, it makes everybody be able to say, oh, maybe something more is possible. That's why I think it's so powerful when we share our stories, because if that happened to you, well, okay, maybe it's not gonna look the same for me, but something can happen for me too that's positive, that might help the next person have something happen for them that's positive. So I think we can just open up that energy for everybody who's listening. Do you want to like lead a little something, like lead a little, this is just one of those intuitive moments that I'm feeling, but what if you led us through a little process?
Well, I'd like to just read a short little prayer of protection. This is a prayer of protection that's very powerful. And I know whenever I've been in a dicey situation, this is the essence of what I have told myself.
Okay, perfect.
Okay. It's very short. It's: the light of God surrounds me. The love of God enfolds me. The power of God protects me. The presence of God watches over me. Wherever I am, God is.
And, you know, I think it's coming into that present moment. A lot of people talk about that pause in the present moment. And what that made me feel like is like, if I can get into that present moment, into that flow, and we all enter that together, then we allow that something new and good to be born, you know, to come forward. Mm-hmm. And, you know, so I would love to hear a little bit more of your story of what are some of the other things you've taken on, some of the other things you've learned and taught and done, and you can tell us a little bit about your book that you wrote that I think is super cool. And it's so, I think it's inspiring, encouraging. Your story is amazing.
Well, I ended up flying 35 years. I started in 1967 and I retired in 2002, 1 year after 9/11. Now, I was a United-based flight attendant based in Boston during 9/11, which happened, back in 2001. And I was #1 purser. So that meant every time I bid, whatever trip I bid, I got, because it goes by seniority. And I bid Flight 175 initially, which was the first airplane to hit the tower. It was the United Airlines plane. I was scheduled to fly that in September 2001.
Wow.
But my friend Brian called me up, a flight attendant I've known for years, and we had a conversation about the layovers in the hotels. And he said, "Oh, you want this other trip to Los Angeles because it's a better layover in Santa Monica." I went to the computer and changed it.
Wow.
Yeah. So, but that's where intuition kicks in. God protects us if we're meditating, tuning in every day. We get the guidance we need. I've seen it many, many times. The higher self knows what's up ahead. I mean, I've even had dreams of premonitions of airplanes crashing, which have happened, 2 or 3 days after the dream. Not the airline specifically, but I could see the event. So there is no time. We live in, we live in a dimension where we have time, but in reality, I guess we're living in parallel dimensions. That's why metaphysics is so fascinating to me. It's kind of bends your mind. But okay, after that, I had flown for 35 years, so I retired in 2002. And I kept looking and looking and looking for what I wanted to do next. And nothing was really resonating that well with me. But then I surrendered. Now, we always get the answer when we surrender. Mm-hmm. And I was walking down my driveway with my boxer dog, Dory, and I was actually crying and speaking out loud that I had given up. It had been 2 years. I didn't know what to do next. And the very next day, I went to a bookstore and bought a book that led to becoming a Silva Ultramind trainer, teaching the work of Jose Silva all over the country for 5 years. And I trained about 3,000 people in the Silva techniques, which are all based on going within, getting to that alpha level, using creative visualization. When you go to sleep at night, you can do mental videos to ask your higher self questions. You can change an experience you're having that's you'd rather see it another way, and you can actually shift your thought, because what I've learned is it's all in our perception. If you want to see perfection, you have to change your perception. And because we get very mesmerized by our 5 senses, it can be hard to do if you don't have techniques. Jose Silva came up with some very, very powerful techniques. And many of the great teachers of today have taken the Silva training. Esther Hicks, Wayne Dyer, Carl Symington was an oncologist, a cancer doctor who used it to have his cancer patients feel like Pac-Man was eating up their cancer cells, and he got tremendous results. Wow. Our visualization abilities and our imagination are so powerful, but we need to learn how to use our minds in a special way in order to tap into it. So I did that for 5 years. And then after I taught for 5 years all over the country, and then I was encouraged to write a book. My students always wanted to know, well, how did you get so interested in all this stuff? So in 2014, my book came out, Secrets of a Metaphysical Flight Attendant, published by Devorah Press. And it's my spiritual memoir that explains the whole journey I went on. There are actually 3 husbands in the book. And I've had a very, very fun, interesting life so far. But I'm always reinventing myself. Now I'm planning to just keep going with all sorts of interesting metaphysical avenues that I like to pursue, and helping people learn how to solve problems by going within. Because I've learned there is never a problem without a spiritual solution. Mm-hmm. And that is the truth. Mm-hmm. I mean, sometimes it's not what we want to be the solution, granted, but there is always a solution.
Well, that is a perfect timing to lead to telling us a little bit about your free gift.
Oh, okay. Yes, I am also an Udemy trainer. I have a course called Metaphysics Made Easy on the udemy.com, and I'm offering it as a free gift. All you'll need to get is the code to go into udemy.com, and you'll get an email.
So they'll have a link to click.
Right. They'll have a link. Right. So that's what I'm offering. And in that course, I talk about the shift that we're going through right now. I had Lyme disease, which is a very serious situation for a lot of people. And I know people all over the country get it now. And it was undiagnosed. Nobody could figure out what I had. I had one doctor who I went to tell me I was just suffering from old age and I needed to get over it. And I was only 49. He thought I was old. And then my hair started falling out and I found out it was Lyme disease. But I had one day, I was taking this doxycycline that they give you, and I thought, am I just going to do this for the rest of my life? And I remembered how I'd gone to my perfect higher self when I was healed of cancer, and I did the same thing, and that was it. I've never had any symptoms since.
Wow. So do you talk about how to do that in the course?
In the course, how do you get there? Yep. Okay. You have to, it's always individual how you manage to get there, but it's there. Anybody can do it. I'll tell you another thing. One day I was working on another healing that I had. It was a lump on my body. And I was doing some prayerful work. And then spontaneously, I felt this unbelievable energy pulsate out of my heart chakra. And it was just pulsating. And it was so powerful. I'd never had anything like that happen before. But at the same time, I realized, oh my God, God is within. The power is within us. That's why I call my company Inner Power, because once you tap into your inner power, you can do anything. But you have to have that experience, and you will have it if you desire it, because whatever you desire will show up. But, I find some people are just kind of lukewarm about wanting to free themselves from a negative state. But if it gets really, I had no choice. When I got that cancer diagnosis, I could not live with that nightmare. I had to free myself. And the options he gave me were not good. So I found another answer. And I'm so grateful that that man that I met with the brain tumor healed told me his story. And you're right, Devorah. It's so important for people to tell their stories.
Right. Because otherwise we have no idea what's possible.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right? Because if I hear your story, I'm thinking, wow, there's this whole other possibility. And especially now in this time where people are being asked to stop the work they're doing, a lot of people, and stop schooling. So then what if we use that to have this expanded consciousness and to start to do what you're saying, to feel this higher protection, this higher power. And that's our lane. That's my interview series. The people who are listening, that's our lane. People have different lanes of where they can affect good and do their work in the world. But those of you who are wanting to trust your intuition, this is our lane to do that. And so your story, I think, just strengthens our confidence that we can do it.
You're doing good work. Yes, it's important.
Right. So what I want people to do is to click on the link, do all the steps to get Rebecca's free gift, start it. And if we're still going in the summit, post what you're up to. And even before the free gift, even once you get it, you can post, what are you doing right now to bring a higher consciousness forward for yourself, for people around you? Just because it happens that we're just in this very unusual time in the world right now. So we're kind of at the end, Rebecca. So maybe before we wrap up, leave us with a few last words of inspiration.
Well, my favorite expression is on the back of my business card, and it is, if you want to see perfection, change your perception. And you have the power within to do it. Yeah. And just keep studying metaphysics and spirituality and all the positive things. Forget about the negatives. Whatever you're feeding your mind is what you're manifesting.
So it's so true. And it's so important that everyone watching, you realize that your story makes a difference. you know, people often have the feeling that, well, I don't have such a dramatic story. It doesn't matter. Whatever your story of how you got back up is, in the wisdom you've gained, that's your story to tell. And so, Rebecca, thank you for telling your story, which is such a great and amazing, inspiring story. Like from your UFO to healing cancer, it's like, whoa.
Thank you. It was great to be here.
So great. Everybody, thank you all, everybody, so much. Grab her free gift, jump into the Facebook group. And as I always say in farewell, remember to go out in the world, share your story, live your purpose, and be a blessing. Bye, everybody.